Hello and welcome to the Game Business Show. It's our fourth episode this week. We won't normally be doing 4 episodes in a week, but this is our debut week. This is our first week on the show, and it's been quite a week, I have to say. We launched on Monday with our announcement where we got people to sign up, and then on the Tuesday we put out our first show. If you listen to that, please do. I think it's a really good show. My guest host was Stephen Tortilla, and the big focus was on GTA 6 and the impact that's going to have on the market. We also talked about GDC. We talked about Assassin's Creed sales. We talked about Trump tariffs. We talked about the Entertainment Software Association's Accessible Games Initiative. With Ubisoft made a guest appearance on that show. So that was on Tuesday. Immediately after that, we did an interview with Mike Morhaime. Mike Morhaime is the co-founder of Blizzard. If you don't know who he is, he set up a new publisher in 2020 called Dreamhaven. They announced a couple of games this week. One was the big game they announced was Wildgate. Wildgate, it gave me Sea of Thieves vibes. I've had people come to me and say, it's nothing like Sea of Thieves. It feels like Sea of Thieves to me. Crew-based game, in Sea of Thieves in space anyway. Crew-based games, lots of destroying each other's ships and hunting for treasure. Obviously, it's not exactly the same, but it had a vibe to it to me. That was quite cool. But he also announced a game called Mechabellum. I say announced, the game's already been out. But Dreamhaven had picked up the publishing rights. And what I thought was great about that story, really fascinating about that story, is the StarCraft community. So Mike Morhaime's previous community from Blizzard is the one that introduced him to that game. You can read about that story, or you can listen to it or watch it on our YouTube channel right now. We then took a little bit of a pause on Wednesday. Before Thursday, we ran our big in-depth look at the state of game investment. We interviewed 7 different game investors, early stage investors, VCs, all different types of companies who, and you know what, it wasn't as bleak as I thought. It wasn't super positive. It wasn't overwhelmingly positive, but it was also wasn't bleak either. I really think you should give it a listen. I think there's a lot of optimism in there, a little bit of hope about where the market's heading. That was yesterday. And here we are with the 4th show. And it's me on my own today. I say on my own, my producer Richard is also here. He's welcome to chime in. And today we're going to talk about Netflix games. I interviewed the head of Netflix games, the president of Netflix games called Alain Tascan. But before I get to that, what I wasn't expecting this week was such a busy news week. In the media, we had some smaller stories on the media side, as well as the launch of the game business, which obviously is the biggest story. Game Informer returned on Tuesday with the full team that disappeared towards the end of last year when it was closed. They have a new investor, a new company is behind it, has backed it. It's still independent. When I first heard about the Game Informer coming back, when I heard it was the full team, which is what was I heard at GDC. My initial reaction was, well, that's going to be expensive. And it is obviously going to be expensive. It's a big team, lots of costs on that team. But reading through what they're planning, it seems like they've thought very hard about monetizing outside of just pure advertising. I think that's interesting. And obviously, it's great news to have anything in the media where things are being added and not taken away. So great that Game Informer came back as a positive news story. We then had a surprise thing happen yesterday. Well, 2 surprises. One was bigger than the other, but this one was a surprise to me. Was Nintendo announced a Direct. Now, again, and actually debuted a Direct, a Switch 1 Direct. This is surprising because in less than a week, we will have the Switch 2 Nintendo Direct. Now, the Switch 1 Direct, the reason why it's important Nintendo do these Directs for Switch 1, because this is one of the key challenges they're going to have with Switch 2. They have 129 million people who played Nintendo Switch in the 12 months, the end of December 2024. Now, and Nintendo's the only company I seem to know that actually does annual users rather than monthly active users or daily active users. But 129 million people is a lot. And I suspect for Nintendo, this is by far the most engaged audience they've had moving from one generation to the other. Obviously, we don't have the data that goes far back. Maybe the DS had a good engaged audience going into the 3DS. But Nintendo often sees its audience fade away towards the end of a generation. This isn't the case this time. They have more active users, annual active users, now than they had the year before. So this is obviously a really big deal for Nintendo. They need to keep those Switch 1 users engaged because while they wait to upgrade them to Switch 2. And the best way to do that is with games. Now, the 2 big first-party games, first-party-ish games that Nintendo are releasing on Switch 1 still is Metroid Prime Beyond, Metroid Prime 4, which Metroid's not the biggest franchise for Nintendo. It's obviously well-loved by fans. It's a big AAA project. And I think it's got a lot of potential, Metroid. I think it should be doing more than it is. That's obviously a big one for Nintendo still to come. They've also got a brand new Pokemon game, Pokemon ZA. Now, people point out that if you look at the transition to DS to 3DS, Nintendo also had a Metroid game that launched on the 3DS to Switch. Sorry, Nintendo also had a 3DS Switch game and a 3DS Metroid game, a 3DS Pokemon game as well. But those post games were more either one was a remake and one was a sort of a follow up to the previous year's game. We're talking a full new Pokemon game, a full new Metroid game. They also announced Tomodachi, a new Tomodachi Life title. And if you don't remember Tomodachi Life, I don't blame you, it's quite long ago. It was 10 years ago now. The last Tomodachi Life, which like a sort of like Animal Crossing, but not quite, game, actually did really well on the 3DS. It sold around 7 million units. And I think it was the 11th best-selling game on the 3DS. In fact, it was. So it's a potentially big thing. Now, it's important Nintendo keep releasing games on the Switch, to keep that audience engaged while they upgrade them to Switch 2. But this is the balance. This is the challenge. If they put too much onto the Switch 1, if they keep doing that cross-gen approach, they may see a slower move to Switch 2. If they put all their games on Switch 2, they might end up losing a load of audience who have just there's no games for me on Switch 1, I'm going to go elsewhere. So there is a balance they need to strike. We'll talk more about this next week when they reveal the Switch 2, and we'll see what Nintendo's approach will be. The other big thing that happened yesterday was that Ubisoft has announced they are forming a new subsidiary with Tencent. That subsidiary is going to feature their three biggest mega franchises: Assassin's Creed, Rainbow Six, and Far Cry. Tencent is investing 1.16 billion euros into it. It values that subsidiary at about 4 billion euros. Ubisoft is still the primary owner of it, but Tencent has a 25% stake. It is good. Ubisoft needed that money, needed that injection, and it's clear that Tencent really didn't want to inject the money into the full Ubisoft, which is around 17,000 employees. It's a huge organization with lots of cost attached to it. But they do want to invest in those super franchises that are potentially worth billions and billions and billions. So Assassin's Creed and Far Cry and Rainbow Six. This is, on the one side, it's good news, and it's exactly what Ubisoft need to do. They need those franchises, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rainbow Six. They need that kind of money. They're big development projects. They're incredibly massive franchises. They're worth the money, basically. Some of the Ubisoft's other games, Ghost Recon, The Division, Just Dance, Rayman, those games are Prince of Persia, those sort of games. Those games, some of them are profitable, but they're on the smaller scale, they're on the smaller end, the margins aren't so great on them, particularly when you look at how much Ubisoft spends on this stuff. Ubisoft has spoken about needing to become more agile, listening to the players. Behind the scenes, they're talking about trying to be more focused on their games. Not every game they make now needs to be a 100-hour open world epic that has driving in it and stealth in it and action in it. They can just make a really good stealth action Splinter Cell. They can just make a really good Prince of Persia platformer. They really can just go all in on something like Ghost Recon or Just Dance. They can really fully focus on something. And for them, that might, because in this market, if you do something like that, you are focused. Look at Space Marine 2 last year, even look at Resident Evil generally. If you can do something that's fully focused, that caters to an audience and does an extremely good job of it, you have the chance to break out beyond that audience. That's something that Ubisoft is talking about behind the scenes, and that's something that its core business now can focus on doing. The result of this is almost inevitably going to be quite a large number of layoffs, or at least some layoffs. It's a very big organization. Costs are going up. If they're going to start making games quicker with smaller teams, which probably is the ideal approach for them, they're going to have to start losing some of that staff. Hopefully they can protect as many people as they can. Hopefully if there's areas of the business that they're not too sure about, they can sell off or find new owners for. So on the one hand, it feels positive. It's ultimately what Ubisoft needs to do in order to become a more sustainable games company. But on the other hand, I suspect there's going to be a lot of negative headlines to come in terms of cuts there. I hope for the best for the team there because they're a wonderful team. But that was a big story that broke yesterday. That was it. There was also another small story yesterday from PlayStation. Didn't get really picked up very much, but it should have done because Phil Rosenberg, he's a senior vice president of global partner development and relations at Sony, has stepped down after 20 years. He's been a mainstay of that business now for pretty much every console launch that PlayStation's ever done. And he's a very familiar face in the market. And good luck, Phil, with whatever is next, if there is anything. Now, onto our main subject. Now, normally during this bit, it would be an interview and I'd introduce the guest and we'd have a lovely little chat and talk about those things. We did the interview, but there was no video. There's no audio. It is so I'm going to try and recount it to you. So I apologize if you just want to read it. You can go on thegamebusiness.com if you've got it in the newsletter. If you're listening to this above the article, you can just read the article if that's what you prefer. But if you're somebody who's going for a little walk and want to listen to it, I'll tell you a little bit about this this interview. So I interviewed Alain Tascan, who is the president of games at Netflix, and Alain is probably best known if you look at his CVs. He spent just under 6 years at Epic Games, where he led the development, first party development there. And the games he worked on was, of course, Fortnite being the biggest, but also Rocket League, Fall Guys, Lego Fortnite. You don't get much bigger than that. So when people are talking about when people announced him, naturally, it was all about the Fortnite guys, Epic guys, come to Netflix to revolutionize its game strategy. Netflix was at GDC last week, and they put on an event on the side of GDC where they told us about that game strategy. And when I heard it, I have to say I got a different vibe. I didn't get a Fortnite vibe. Now, there were 4 areas of which Netflix is focusing on. And the first 2 are something you might expect. So they're focusing on narrative games, sort of transmedia projects as well, which makes sense considering the medium. And they're also going to push their big mainstream IP, including IP they partner with, like WWE and Squid Game, and even Grand Theft Auto, which obviously been a big hit on Netflix. The Grand Theft Auto remastered done very, very well on that platform. Now, we'll come back to that stuff in a little bit, but the other 2 bits is stuff that made me think of something else. So these other two areas were around Netflix is wanting to become a trusted destination for kids and families. So they want it to be seen as like, if you want to play games with your kids, this is the place to go. The other place is they want to utilize modern TVs where you use your mobile phone as the controller. And in particular, they were talking about party games. They were talking about ways that you can, and things you can use your phone in order to play party games, conjuring ideas of Jackbox games and that sort of stuff. Tascan at GDC spoke about the need to eliminate friction with a control interface that everyone is familiar with. Create games and experiences that can reach the broadest possible audience, which on Netflix is estimated to be around 700 million people. So all of it reminded me of something else. All of it reminded me of Nintendo Wii. And I mentioned to Tascan, it felt like the Wii, the idea of an accessible controller interface, the idea of party games, the idea of being for kids and families. And I was worried he might take offense to that, but it turns out actually Tascan, if you go back into his history, you go back before Fortnite, you go back before Epic, he spent a good deal of time at EA, 8 years, where he worked across Wii games, including Need for Speed, Spore, Skate, and Boogie. And he said to me, I love the Wii. And if you look at a lot of the games I worked on while at EA, there was a lot of Wii. His point was, I'm very vigorous about lowering friction and eliminating it if we can. I see sometimes that subscription is a friction as well. And that's why they made the Squid Game, mobile game they released back in December. They released that for free. You didn't have to have a subscription to that game. They want to eliminate that friction. And so it gave me very much Wii vibes. Party games are a part of this. So he points out that on every phone, you have a gyroscope, you have a microphone, you have a speaker, you have a touchscreen. And if you give these sort of control interfaces to creative people, what can they do with those things? And whether that's something you can play on your own or with 2 people or 20 people, he asks, can we do something really engaging? He thinks that, ultimately you're trying to reach Netflix's broadest audience. They're not necessarily talking about core games here. That doesn't mean they're not going to do those sorts of games, but for them, they want to make sure there's a way of reaching a broader audience. The thing that he keeps talking about is the importance of disruption. There's a lot. I think one of the reasons why there's a lot of enthusiasm around what Netflix is talking about is because the market is desperate for some disruption, some change that can generate revenue, generate money and growth for the games market. In fact, he said to me in my interview, I'm wondering if people are being nice because we're a little bit of blue sky during very grey weather, or is the vision really compelling? I kind of felt that it might be. And he talked very much actively about the importance of that disruption. He talks about the fact that people are demanding these days and you need to do something new. What the new thing is that Netflix is doing that will catch on, he's not sure. It could be the transmedia concept. It could be the idea of you do something in the game and it affects what's going on in the TV show, possibly using AI technology to do that. Or it could be vice versa, something that's interrupting the TV show impacting the game. With the Squid Game, for instance, you watch the show, you've got currency in the game. That's quite a rudimentary collaboration between the TV and the game. But we also saw Bandersnatch from Black Mirror, which obviously was very interactive TV, very much blurred the lines there. So he thinks that might be something that catches on. Transmedia is not new. We've had that sort of area for a while, but obviously with Netflix's platform, there's a unique opportunity here to perhaps make that work. Indeed, even the idea of using the controller as using your phone as a controller isn't particularly new. PlayStation launched PlayLink a long time ago now, which was a concept designed to make games a little bit more accessible. The Wii U tablet is effectively the idea. Go back to the GameCube and you had the Game Boy Advance being used as a controller. So it's not completely new. But obviously, what's key here is Netflix's 700 million audience, and it's making sure that you're creating frictionless gameplay there. So all this stuff, again, it's not particularly new, but it's presented in a way on a platform that's new. And although Tascan can't be sure which one will prove to be disruptive, he does think there was a bunch of unique cards that Netflix has to play. One of the things that he did say on stage, and I'm surprised this didn't get picked up more because it sounds somewhat like he's questioning the future of the video game consoles. He said on stage, when it comes to console, we started to look at the future where the platform is agnostic. Look at the younger generation. Are 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds dreaming of owning a PlayStation 6? I am not sure. Basically, young people want to interact with a digital screen, wherever it is, whatever it is. And when you think about console and the sort of, it's about high definition screens, it's about high cost hardware, using a controller. Doesn't quite have that level of ease and accessibility young people demand from games, and therefore the next generation's going to demand some games. However, where I questioned this sort of, not saying he was dismissing of consoles, in fact, he said he was a console fan, but where I was a little bit questioning here was that whether it's consoles or digital platforms like Steam, they're really great at engaging players. They're full of community features, their ability to connect with each other, to play games with each other, to show what you share with each other, to get achievements, create avatars. They're great. They're interactive, gamified platforms. Netflix isn't that. Netflix is a place where you go in, you choose a TV show. I can't see what my friends are watching on Netflix. That's not how this works. So I asked Tascan, some of the investment that Netflix is making in video games, is this just games? It's just the software, or are they going to be looking at doing things on the platform itself? And I have to say, clearly he hadn't been asked that before, and he was taken off guard because he said it was a very good question. And it turns out they are very much actively looking into this. It's different, he says. I might not want to know what you're watching. That's your thing. But when you talk about games and wanting to do something interactive, that might be an opportunity to share some things or to communicate. We want to be very thoughtful about the platform and why people are coming on there. And then if it's for something that's a bit more of a game, maybe there will be an opportunity to do things with other members of the audience. That's that connectivity thing. He actually said, come back to me in a year where hopefully they can show some of the things that we're talking about. But ultimately, it comes down to, is it fun? Is it adding value and engagement to the platform, which is an important thing for Netflix games? So we'll see. That sounds quite exciting. The possibility, maybe I can get an achievement for watching Friends. Who knows? Now, look, we've been here before. I've been here many times before. I think Disney, BBC, Paramount, Fox, Universal, that's at the top of my head, have all moved into games, some of them really ambitiously. They've bought studios, they've acquired IP, and then moved out of games again or changed their strategy drastically. Ultimately, video games, these companies are often, I don't want to say a rounding error, but they are a small part of their business. And when they find out how hard it is, how challenging it is to be successful, they end up backing away and going back to focusing on what they do, which is making TV and movies. So I asked Tascan why he feels that Netflix might be different. What's going to stop Netflix getting bored in a couple of years' time if they don't see some immediate success? And he acknowledged this question. In fact, he had a very prepared answer to it. So it's something that clearly he's been challenged on before. But he believes in Netflix leadership because they are used to, as he puts it, they're used to being stubborn. They're used to making investment, and they're used to acknowledging that it takes time. He gives an example of the two CEOs of Netflix, Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters. Ted's been at Netflix 25 years. Greg has been at Netflix for 15 years. Look at where Netflix was 10 years ago in terms of their core business, says Alain. They know the path of being stubborn, hardworking, innovating, having a vision and going after it. The road is not always straight to the top. I believed them when they told me that gaming was important, because if Netflix wants to entertain the world, there's no way around it. They need to be in games. When I look at these two leaders in particular, but also the rest of them, I believe in their full commitment. Basically, they're younger people used to the modern market. They're not Disney or BBC, who have been going for, in some cases, hundreds of years. They are very actively, they know the journey that needs to go on. That's his belief in it. Now, I got a bit more clarity around Netflix's vision. We've got an idea now what they're trying to do. They're trying to create transmedia projects, narrative projects, party games. It has a Wii vibe to it, but with some differences on there. But he keeps coming back to it. He doesn't know which of these is going to work. He doesn't know what's going to resonate the most. And he keeps saying that ultimately the proof is in the delivery. It sounds exciting. It sounds promising. Potentially unlocks loads of players for the games industry. But ultimately, there's no knowing what will work. And it all comes down to the execution. But there's no disguising he was excited. Netflix is, after all, the biggest entertainment platform in the world. And if Tascan and his team make games a serious part of it, that may prove to be a boon for the entire games industry. We ended our chat and he said, sometimes I use the phrase that we need to find our voice. We have all these things to think about and the audience we can reach. How are we using all the elements to do new things? We have the IP, we have the transmedia element of it, the Netflix muscle we can flex. I must confess, it's a really exciting place to be. I have to say, it's really interesting to see Netflix really pushing in this area and being open about their plans and doing something that isn't just trying to be a new Xbox and trying to be a new PlayStation. In fact, perhaps the market really could do with a new Nintendo Wii. So that was my chat with Netflix. You can read the interview and the analysis on thegamebusiness.com right now. We will be back next week, obviously, possibly not with 4 shows, but we have an interview with the CEO of Arrowhead, the makers of Helldivers 2. We've got that going out on Tuesday. And then also next week is the reveal of the Nintendo Switch 2, which I am extremely excited about. We're going to have a special show on a Thursday special news analysis show where we'll be diving into that reveal. All about that next week. And we may have something else for you as well, another little bonus surprise. But until then, thank you for tuning in this week. I really appreciate all the support, all the feedback we've had, so many comments, so many emails. It's been a really successful week. The first show actually had more downloads than I think most podcasts I've ever worked on, including the one that I worked on last year. And the first story went everywhere, and I was really about GTA 6. So I'm really feeling pretty excited, but obviously I know it's all about consistency. It's about keep doing this. I hope you keep tuning in. If you've got anything you think we should be doing better, you don't like so much, you like to change, Chris, stop talking so much, keep talking, shut up. Please drop me a line and we'll take all that and we'll try and build a show that is together that's good for the entire games industry. Until then, thank you for listening and or watching and have a good weekend.